Right, I think, well, lovely days. We're using microphones not because we've all got such weak voices, but because this is being recorded. So that's why everyone is using microphone. But that's about right, isn't it? That's not too ear-deafening. My name is Adam Lent. I'm the director of the New Local Government Network, and welcome everyone to this event where we are launching, of course, a new report, Outside the Box, the Council Workforce of Tomorrow. I won't bore you with any Chair's introductory thoughts about the workforce, because we have some really excellent speakers and content coming up, and I think that will be informative enough. But just to say that it is, of course, maybe one of the most important, and definitely one of, maybe even the most important issue confronting any organisation, like local government, like a council, trying to drive impact and deliver change. How you treat your workforce, how your workforce are motivated, and how they're structured, and that the key issues we're looking at in this report being launched today. The report has been made possible by 3 organisations, and I want to thank them very much for their support. It's been produced in association with the Local Government Association and with the support of GatenbySanderson and the Public Sector People Managers Association. I'd like just to hand over now for just a very brief word of welcome from GatenbySanderson and from Public Sector People Managers Association. We will also be hearing from the LGA, but a little bit later in the event. So can I just hand over first to Jody, just to say a few words from GatenbySanderson.
Thank you, Adam. I'm not John Houlihan, if you I'm a ring-in, but very delighted to be here. And I'm not going to go on tonight, I just wanted to say literally a couple of moments of introduction. GatenbySanderson, absolutely delighted to be associated with this research. And alongside the paper that you see launched tonight, we have conducted a study into specific leadership issues around the workforce of the future, a subject very dear to our heart as an organisation that finds and develops talented leaders across this sector and the rest of the public sector on a daily basis. So we really hope you enjoy this evening, and thank you for allowing us to be involved.
Thank you very much, Jody. And to Barry Pirie from the PPMA.
The first challenge was, can I do it in 2 minutes? And anybody who knows me knows I don't do anything in 2 minutes. And certainly not speak. Thank you, John. Anyway, in terms of thanks, again, it's really been a privilege. As one of the key voices of public sector, HR and OD, it's been a privilege to be involved. It's great that we actually have been able to engage and actually support this piece of research. The key for us is really going to be the recommendations, in terms of how we actually can make the recommendations live and actually workable within the sector. So again, in conjunction, I would suggest, with LGA and PPMA and other partners, I think that's going to be the interesting challenge for next week and the week after. I think the other element that's really nicely linked to this is the 21st public sector worker, in terms of, that's a piece of work that we've done in conjunction with LGA and Birmingham University. So I think together, as part of this research and that live research is now probably 18 months in its fruition, I think it is now, Sarah, in terms of the public sector.
Yep.
So again, that together will give us a really good platform in terms of engaging, re-engaging that with local government. So I think, well, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that was 2 minutes. Incredible. So now we're going to hear from the authors of the report, Lucy Terry, who is Senior Researcher at the NLGN, and Claire Mansfield, who is Head of Research at NLGN, and Jody Goldsworthy, who you just heard from GatenbySanderson, who's also going to be talking about their research and contributing to the presentation. So hand over to you. Thanks very much.
Yeah, you hit this one. Okay, so we have to try and work the mic out. Can everybody hear me? Perfect. Okay, so hello everybody. It's great to see so many people here today. We've been working on this research for since about last March. And what we wanted to do with this project was we wanted to look at how councils, as they've been changing over the last few years, so as they're becoming commissioning councils, commercial councils, cooperative councils, what this means for the workforce. So we know that due to funding cuts, the workforce have been asked to deliver more with less. But more than this, many of the changes require an entirely new approach to the way that they work, a new skill set and new competencies. And as Barry said, it was noted in the University of Birmingham work last year, 21st Century Public Servant. But at the same time as all these increasing demands and being asked to do more, the advantages of working in local government are not as clear as they once were. So job security, pensions are no longer what they once were, and structural change has eroded sort of the promotion ladder. As councils face an uncertain future, it's more important than ever that their workforce fits their changing needs, and we wanted to look at what current and future employees feel motivated by, what will make them productive, and what the council can offer them back. So in the report we outline what we call a new deal that councils can offer the workforce of today and tomorrow, and we look at how councils will need to sort of change their culture in some ways, their working practices, but also maybe how they recruit and how they develop and support staff. We're also going to hear, as Adam said, from Jody on the work that GatenbySanderson will be doing on leadership. So a very quick nod to the methodology. We carried out a survey, 2 surveys, one of the workforce, and we got 2,574 responses. We're very happy with that. And we carried out a survey of HR directors and got 113 responses from 113 different councils responding. We interviewed a range of local government stakeholders. We carried out 2 roundtables, one in Manchester and one in London, and we carried out 3 case studies, one in Wigan, one in Wiltshire, and one in St Albans, who are here to talk to us a little bit more today.
Okay, so we realised that before we could, outline a new deal for the local government workforce, we needed to understand what are the motivations to work in local government. So we wanted to know, why does someone choose to work in a council? And we found that there are both intrinsic and extrinsic benefits of local government work. And the most common motivation, selected by 42% of our survey respondents, was public service ethos. So this, for our survey respondents, meant being able to serve their community, make a difference, help disadvantaged groups, and help shape their place. So this was a really important motivation that can be drawn upon. And it was also relevant for people, not just with decades of experience, but also very recent members of the workforce. So when we broke down it by segments, that was apparent. And then there are also more sort of extrinsic rewards that maybe are less to do with the job itself. And work-life balance for our survey respondents came second overall. Again, this was still relevant to people joining the workforce in recent years. And we feel that both of these benefits potentially allow good grounding for a new deal. And they also echo what surveys show millennial employees want out of work. You'll see there are a couple of benefits on there that have undoubtedly changed, been reduced because of the cuts, and councils aren't really going to be in a position to address them in the near future, so job security, pension scheme, and this shows really just the need to find an alternative deal, a new way of attracting the local government workforce. So I've talked about how public service ethos is a big motivation for our workforce, for the local government workforce. People are drawn to local government because they want to make a difference. However, what we found is that when someone starts to work in a council, sometimes they are frustrated by their lack of ability to innovate, to have that freedom to make a difference. They find the bureaucratic culture a little bit frustrating. They find themselves a little bit hampered. They find that managers don't always enable them to thrive. Rather, it's the kind of command and control leadership. And so we outline in the report that there's a need for long-term cultural change, a shift towards self-management, towards a lack of hierarchy that really will lead to a more creative and courageous workforce. So we outline sort of key ways to do this, a self-managing working culture, giving junior staff more autonomy, models of leadership that are inspiring, and there's been a lot of work done on this, and Gatenby are going to talk about this in a minute, but it's kind of the qualities of being able to inspire, to empower, rather than to manage and control. And of course, it's really important to note that councillors have a crucial role in this. They will often be natural supporters already of workforce reform because they recognise the need for something different. So now I'm going to hand over to Jody, who's going to talk a bit more about their research on leadership.
Okay. So what we set out to determine here was not a line in the sand that would be forevermore the answer, because we all know that leadership is a constant moving feast. This is about starting a dialogue. For us, we were trying to answer the question, what are the things, what are the attributes that the most successful leaders are doing and will need to do in the future to differentiate from those who will be less successful in delivering a fairly dramatic and fairly complex change agenda. And what was really striking about this research was that it didn't really matter so much what context leaders were working in. Some very, very similar themes came through. And I think that's quite interesting given the very varied organisational models and delivery models, service delivery models that are emerging. Obviously some of these characteristics will be more important in different contexts, but there was strikingly common themes. So what came out of here was that effective leaders need to have three foci. One is a focus on self, some very strong personal attributes. Secondly, some real strengths around the way that they engaged with other people. And thirdly, around their ability to focus on deliverables and to execute. And that's obviously fairly intuitive, but underneath that sits quite a lot of detail. So I just wanted to run you through very briefly 6 leadership archetypes that emerged from the research. And there is a little paper on your seats that elaborates on this and on our findings in a little bit more detail. The first of those we're calling the engaging communicator. This attribute is all about the ability to engage and inspire others and to engender trust as a baseline for effective communication and a confidence around managing the council's reputation as well as their own personal image as a leader. The best leaders were strikingly doing that at both a personal and at a council-wide level. The second one there we're calling adaptable innovator. This is about innovation, as you would expect, but being very learning-focused and self-fulfilling in terms of reflective and wanting to change. So able to flex to changing priorities, wanting and seeking transformation and evolution, so not accepting the status quo, but constantly seeking new answers, and being prepared to take qualified and evidence-based risk in order to achieve that. The third area here was around strategic and commercial strategists, a bit of a mouthful. What was really striking here is that this is the ability, a very sophisticated ability to navigate ambiguity and complexity and to create a meaningful way forward, not just for the organisation, but one that workforce individuals can engage with. So the ability to win hearts and minds and bring people along with them on that journey. And what was striking here was that the best leaders were able to balance what were often quite conflicting priorities between the social purpose of the organisation and the citizens that it served and the commercial hard decisions that they needed to make day to day. There is often quite a trade-off to be made. The best leaders walked that continuum with a great deal of sophistication. The fourth area here is around talent developer. This is about building empowering organisations underneath them. We all know that in a world that we're in now, where we've delayed local government quite significantly and we've created quite big steps up between lower level managerial jobs and the top jobs, that it's quite tricky to actually build this culture around you and to distribute leadership. The best leaders were finding a way through and around that, with support of course from their HR and talent colleagues. The fifth area here is around partnership creator. This is the ability to create strong interpersonal relationships for win-win purposes across organisational boundaries. So not just bringing people in their own organisation with them, but being able to influence and impact, often without direct authority, the resources that they needed to command in order to deliver outcomes for the citizens. What was really striking here is that political leadership as a buzzword didn't come up very often, either when we talked to HRDs or when we talked to chief executives and senior leaders. What was far more common now was to articulate that ability to influence politicians and to understand political sensitivities using words around influence and impact. And the final area here was around influential driver. So this is around some of the core personal characteristics of resilience and courage, tenacity, the willingness to see things through and not to give up. But it's also using sophisticated influencing skills rather than just relying on rational arguments, thinking about win-win strategies and actually building influential partnerships for the long term rather than just the task at hand. So that's a whistle-stop tour. What I would like to stress is that this is not about typecasting or labelling individuals, but rather using archetypes to describe the kind of characteristics that the best leaders will need to adopt.
Thank you, Jody. Okay, so Lucy and Jody have both outlined the need for change in the working culture of the councils over the long term. But we also wanted to look at what councils could do in the short term, the immediate term, to how they can recruit the workforce of tomorrow, but also how you can retain the current workforce and sort of motivate the current workforce. So one of the things that came out quite strongly to us was that the survey of HR directors, 65.9% of people told us that the greatest barrier to recruitment was the negative perception of local government. And you see one of the quotes from our workforce survey was there, is we battle with the perception that people who work here are only waiting for their pensions. So I think it's safe to say that local government gets local government gets a bit of an unfair press. So you'll see I've put a snapshot of some of these things. We've got a Daily Mail article, incompetent civil servants, let's start by asking the council Jobsworth who stopped me parking outside my house. We've got a book called Jobsworth Confessions from the Man from the Council, which is not particularly helpful for councils, and the back of that book reads, the 1960s and the 1970s were the halcyon days of local government, when rules and regulations multiplied at the expense of common sense. And no one was entirely sure what the person in the next office actually did, or even what purpose of their own job served. And sort of my personal favourite is, well, it's not my favourite, the negative press that just slowly creeps into the mainstream media. So if anybody's been watching EastEnders, there's a really bizarre story arc going on about the bins at the moment. You can see a scene there that says the council need to make sure they pick them up when they're supposed to. It's literally, I don't even watch this regularly, but every time I watch EastEnders there's a reference to the bins and the council. So local government sort of needs to do something in some ways to counteract this negative perception, negative stereotype. Otherwise we'll be putting off ambitious people who just think that the council is full of jobs with pen pushers and anonymous pen pushers. I think that's particularly unfair on the workforce. I mean, it's always probably been unfair on the workforce, but particularly the workforce of today that are trying their hardest to innovate through lots of cuts to services and try and maintain services. So we wanted to look at sort of ways that people could look to counteract these sort of stereotypes. So I think the main thing that for me or for us coming out of the research was that the council needs to become more outward facing. It needs to kind of open up, because there's a tendency within a council when things get a bit difficult, a defensive crouch is taken, and the need for opening up more is definitely now. So you can see a picture there of Wiltshire Council, that's the top right one, which is a very much open office. When you walk in, there's a cafe. You can see the different layers, and you can see that clearly from that picture, but you can see different layers of people working. So when people go in, it very much feels like they can see people working, they can see what they're doing. The bottom picture here is bottom left is from Wakefield, where they put in a museum into the council office. And a lot of councils have put libraries in. I know Brent have got a library in there, Wakefield have as well, which means that when people come to the council office, it's associated with something sort of recreational, enjoyable, not just going to pay a bill or make a complaint or something along those lines. Another important thing, particularly that Wiltshire Council, when we case studied them, noted was the activity of employees on social media. So often I think councils can feel it's a bit of a risk having people talking on Twitter, but as you can see I've picked on Mark Rogers, the Chief Exec from Birmingham, for no particular reason other than it says that he's the Chief Exec of Birmingham in his Twitter biography. So he's quite happy to have his name there, to have people engage with him. And Wiltshire felt that having people talking on Twitter about their jobs, about working for the council and positively was a good thing. And they've partnered up with an organisation called Glassdoor, which is a website where employees and former employees anonymously review companies and their management. It's a little bit like TripAdvisor, and Wiltshire partnered with Glassdoor, felt that they were taking a bit of a risk in doing so, but they actually got they got a rating of 4.6 out of 5, which is very high. So it's worked out quite well, and they respond to all the feedback that they get. And then secondly, in terms of recruitment practices, I think one of the important things, just briefly, is to grasp upon those elements that Lucy outlined earlier on, that the top two motivations for working in local government and the top two inspiring things are public service ethos and work-life balance. And one new recruit that we talked to said, I want to be able to see something and say, I did that, I helped achieve that to my mum and dad. So particularly we know from millennials and the next generations, public service ethos and work-life balance are going to be particularly important. So making that part of your recruitment strategy going forward will be essential.
Okay, so as Claire's already mentioned, It's important to think about the existing workforce. Any workforce strategy really needs to start with them. So we also focused on staff development and staff retention initiatives. So our survey was really informative on this and really confirmed what you guys will all know very much. It's really quite tough to work in local councils today. It's a period of constant change. There's really high demands. It's an environment that's fairly uncertain. And our survey reflected this. 86% of respondents said they need to do more with less. They also face different demands, different skill sets, newer ways of working, as 21st century public servant outlined. So people don't always feel supported to cope with the pace of this change, but some councils are taking really effective approaches to help people develop those skills, those new approaches. So we looked at some of these. We looked at new ways of doing performance management. In Wigan, they've changed their performance management strategy, and they have a new approach to one-to-ones, which are called My Time sessions. And these address a much more broad range of things than usually considered in one-to-ones. They sort of talk about the person's well-being, how they're doing, what they're struggling with, what development needs they have, really taking a holistic understanding of the employee. And then there's training, and we looked again at really interesting, innovative examples of training in Wigan, where they've got a very interactive experience, basically, which is called Be Wigan, and it's a way of bringing their strategy to life, and it's got lots of creative methods to do it. It's a really, really interesting example. And then finally, we looked at retention initiatives and thinking particularly about councils in the South East and London. How do you stop them from going to the private sector for the higher salaries? Can you really focus on making the job itself rewarding and fulfilling, looking at things like development opportunities? And in St Albans, who we'll hear from in a minute, they are doing a lot of this sort of leadership development. For example, secondments into areas that employees don't usually do. Just really having the opportunity to fulfil and develop themselves.
Thank you. So hopefully there are lots of helpful things in the report. There's lots of helpful little things that people can do, or probably not that little, but small pointers. But there's kind of three key recommendations that we would sort of think about going forward. Firstly, that councils should implement workforce strategies that increase autonomy and reduce hierarchy. So giving the workforce time to feed back and taking in, getting them to feed back into what they think strategy should be. Secondly, we've got that councils should become much more outward facing to counter negative perceptions of working for a council. So a little bit the things I was talking about earlier on, engaging with the public more so that they do know the good work that the councils are doing. And then thirdly, going forward, we need leadership, not management. That's talking about the cultural change that's needed within councils, and Jody has some specific recommendations.
Just briefly, the overwhelming response from the work that we did with HRDs was that leadership development was, I think 75% of the responding council said that was their number one way to plug the leadership skills gap. And our recommendation is not to do that, but to think very carefully about what the infrastructure is that you put in place around that to make it stick, and that goes right down from the top table and their commitment to role modelling the leadership that you're trying to instill. We also developed out of this a talent maturity matrix, which looked at ways that you could integrate some of these leadership skills into other HROD practices.
Great, thank you very much, everybody. That's it from the report. If you have any questions afterwards, obviously very happy to answer them.
Thanks very much, Claire. And I should say that we will have plenty of opportunity for questions and answers later in the session. You can ask questions of the authors of the report and everyone else who's speaking this evening. We're going to hear briefly now from St Albans and District Council. They are featured in the report as a case study. They're doing incredibly innovative and forward-looking things in terms of motivating and developing their workforce. So I'm very pleased to welcome up Ryan Mann, who is a National Management Trainee at St Albans, and also Amanda Foley, who is Head of Corporate Services.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. So I've been asked to very briefly speak about young people and why young people come and work for local government. And so what I thought I'd do is run through a few of my own experiences, what it was that brought me into the public sector, what I've found since starting at St Albans a couple of months ago, and how that feeds into some of the report's findings. So I thought I'd think back to my final year at university last year and what I wanted from my first job. And the first thing that I wanted was variation. I couldn't bear the idea of doing the same thing day in, day out. And the other thing, the main thing for me, was responsibility. I wanted responsibility over my own career, my own development, but I also wanted that responsibility of giving something back. I wanted real work in the real world, and I wanted to be able to create a tangible impact on the impact of the environment around me. And so that's what led me down through the LGA into the NGDP. And whilst through that process I interviewed at a number of councils, and what it was about St Albans that stood out for me, firstly was the fact that it's my district council. It's the one where I've grown up in, I've lived there all my life, and I really wanted to be able to make an impact on an area that's important to me. And the second thing was that when I was interviewing that, I really saw the human side of the council. I saw that where I would fit in as a sort of a person as much as an employee. So that really kind of interested me and attracted me to the council as a place to work. And the final thing was the fact that the council really had a real positive outlook and what seemed to me a very dynamic approach to some of the challenges that local government is facing. I saw some very exciting projects. It didn't see the more for less things a reason to stand still. It was always looking for ways to develop, and I really thought that would be a really exciting place to start my career. And that's exactly what I found since starting. I found a wide range of opportunities for myself. I found exposure to both politicians and to senior staff. I sit just a few desks away from Amanda, and I feel like I can approach Amanda for anything. I don't really feel like there's a door to knock on or anything like that. And I feel like I've got such a wide range of experience in just almost 3 months I've been there now, and I feel as though I've been working in alongside housing, performance management, a little bit of digital transformation, and that was a really big thing for me, wanting to build my CV and get a wide range of experience at an early stage. And in doing so, I've really felt trusted and valued. I felt trusted to get on with work independently. I feel like my opinions have been heard and valued, and my ideas have been valued. And all that goes alongside the more practical benefits of working in local government. The ideas that were mentioned earlier about work-life balance is really important to me. The flexible working, people can work from home, and that is a real big thing for me, especially when I compare my experience to some of my friends in the private sector who are working 10-hour days, and they really don't feel like they're getting much return out of the 10 hours that they're spending. And so that kind of feeds back into the ideas of retention and what councils can do to retain young staff. And for me, it's a really difficult question because there's an increasing trend amongst young people of young people getting itchy feet, and there's a lot of things that councils can't really compete against. There's external factors. For St Albans, you have house prices, for example. Am I going to be able to sort of buy a place nearby? And there's also the attraction of London, which is difficult to compete with. But I found St Albans to have done a lot of things that would make me stay as a young person in terms of breaking down ideas of hierarchy, in terms of increasing my agency and my empowerment over my own career, and kind of getting rid of that idea of stagnation. Because if I was to feel like my career was stagnating, it would be a real issue for me as a young person. But that is done alongside a real culture of support that I found at the council. I feel like there's a right balance between being told to get on with work individually and sort of explore things by yourself, but also teamed with constant dialogue about your own development, support, the idea that you can ask questions and get things wrong. And that's really shone through in, I have weekly one-to-ones with my manager, and so I feel like from the first moment I stepped through the door, my own development was a real kind of importance to the council as much as it was to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ryan. What Ryan failed to say is that I'm making tea every morning. That's a fact. One of the things that we wanted to really feature here was that these are real people. These are our staff, and partly as a district council we are competing with London. We're so close to them, and we can't compete with the London councils. We can't compete with the private sector, particularly around the construction industry, where in the last 2 to 3 years we've felt real pain around planning roles, around anything in housing that's to do with surveying, those kind of construction type of related roles, where bonuses are just being piled on people, you know, in terms of being able to throw that money at them. We don't have those deep pockets and those resources. So how do we make it different? How do we make ourselves more attractive to, you know, to people wanting to either change careers or just start their career with us, or actually just genuinely get off that commute into London, which is where we've kind of majored on a lot of our attention. So we've spent time actually advertising at the stations, you know, kind of the wake up and smell the coffee type ads. We've, you know, particularly picked the stations that have got a lot of throughput. So for us, we've gone north towards Bedford, but we've also then picked out places like West Hampstead and then into Farringdon, you know, the big stops where people are getting on and off along that line that's straight into St Albans. The other thing that we really majored on as well is that we wanted to reach out to our residents. So actually the HR team spent time out in the market. So we actually hired a stall in the marketplace on Saturdays in January and talked to people about working in St Albans. What's it like? You know, what careers are people in that are just passing us by? Have they got a few minutes for a conversation? Actually, we do some of that. We do finance roles. You know, have you ever thought of that? You've got a young child there. How, you know, would you like to get home a bit earlier? You know, those types of things. Actually, trying to reach out to people to make them think differently about a career with us and a career in the council. And then the other side of it is we wanted to do some recruitment videos. You know, we really wanted to major on breaking down that kind of perception that actually there's something not right about the public sector and all of that bad media. So we really wanted to major on not so much about the role, but about the people and getting people talking about themselves a bit more. And some of the videos are a little bit funky. You know, there's some things about what favourite cake they like and that sort of, but it's really about trying to get that human message over. And one of our younger graduates helped to pull those videos together, so it was a great project for them too. We've been running a summer intern scheme now for the last 3 years because we're quite fortunate in St Albans in as much as a lot of the young people do go away to different universities, but they typically come back. So we've got, around the summertime when they do come back looking for work, we've got a glut of quite young, educated young people who are seeking work or work placements and need that experience. And so for the last 3 years now we've done a summer intern scheme. It's a paid scheme, we give a flat weekly rate. But we've actually found this year we had 40 applicants and we took 10 of those. 5 of them have remained with us. Some of the others actually went back to university because they were in their second year, or they were in that gap year to onto their 4th and final year. And that's really been good for us. And as a group this year, they've got together, they've got a very strong bond, they've got a WhatsApp group, they talk to each other all the time, and actually they are helping each other seek other placements within the council. So they're kind of forging their own careers within the little network that they've got together on. So that's really worked well for us. More on the kind of national sort of stage, the Chief Exec James Blake actually worked with the East of England LGA on a project around planning and trying to sort of look at planning, you know, the difficulties that the public sector are actually having in terms of recruitment of planners. And that piece of research is out now, but it's actually helped kind of really sort of focus in on where are the gaps, and also what do we need to do to encourage planners or encourage people into planning, and not least actually help the RTPI to start thinking about putting more courses on. And for us, we've worked in partnership with Oaklands College, so they're now doing an RTPI accredited course, and we've got some young trainees, apprentices actually joined that course now. We've got 2 currently on this year's cohort, so that's been helpful too. And then more on the national sort of stage, there's some work going on around with the Deputy Mayor of London with regards to a kind of more a place agency type of approach to planning, and James Blake is also on that forum as well, where they're actually looking at giving private sector planners experience in the public sector, so 1-year placements. So again, kind of building up an opportunity to see what life is like in the public sector, but also giving that more rounded planning experience, because they don't always get that when they're working in certain agencies in the private sector. They might get an element of the bid process or whatever, but they don't necessarily see the end-to-end process. And so that's an opportunity for them to learn about what it's like to work in the public sector. So I know I've majored predominantly on planning because that's been an area of real focus for us, but we have run a number of different schemes and we are always looking for the national graduates. We wanted to take 2 this year. We've got Ryan, who's brilliant, absolutely brilliant, and we are looking each year to build on more and more of those placements because they've been very valuable to us since we're in our 5th year of having those national graduate trainees.
Thank you very much. That was really fascinating, very interesting stuff. And now we have a brief panel discussion. So I need to invite up the members of the panel who will give us their thoughts and reflections on what they've heard, but also the wealth of their knowledge and experience on workforce development, workforce management issues. So up you come. So we're joined by Sarah Messenger, who is Head of Workforce at the Local Government Association, Andy Donald, Chief Executive of the London Borough of Redbridge, and Sir Steve Bullock, who is Mayor of the London Borough of Lewisham. And Sarah is going to go first, and each panellist is going to speak for about 5 minutes, and then we will open it up to questions.
Certainly, thank you, Adam. I think I should start by saying that I think we need to make a podcast of Adam, or even better than that, we need to get you a part in EastEnders, Adam, and then we can sort out the appalling, constant drivel that we get about. I'm giving away that I watch EastEnders, I'll shut up. Let me start by saying that we welcome the report, and we were really pleased actually when NLGN came to have a conversation about doing this piece of work. And actually pleased because there's lots of us in the workforce space, but it's not very often that an independent think tank, an organisation, says we want to do a piece of work around workforce issues. And I think anything that contributes to the debate, stimulates our thinking, offers some practical insight as to how we can address some of these concerns is important. Because we're all talking about this, and if I'm really honest, we've been talking about a lot of this for quite a long time. One of the things that strikes me whenever I see a report with the word tomorrow in it, and I've written a few myself, is that I've been talking about the workforce of tomorrow for about the last 5 years, and the reality is tomorrow is here, but then tomorrow there'll be another tomorrow. And so it's that kind of constant state of flux and change and the need for adaptability that we're all completely aware of, and we all know it's true, but at the same time the challenge is how do I do the things that I know need to be done in order to make sustainable change rather than get sidetracked by all the day-to-day stuff that also needs to be done and that people expect of the organisation. And it's a real challenge, and I know from my constant conversations with HR practitioners that getting that balance right and then getting the kind of leadership support and the political support for some of the things you might want to do, particularly if they're going to involve some investment, is difficult. And at the same time, I think it's important to emphasise that there's probably a bit of me when I read the report that thought there were elements of it that were more downbeat than they would have been if I'd written it. And I think actually that's just the honesty of it, so it's not a criticism, but I spend most of my time defending the sector, defending the brilliant work that lots of councils do, defending the hard work and innovative work that our employees do, and as I should, and as the LGA should. Doesn't mean we're complacent about the challenges, but I think it's important that all of us in this room and any of us that have a stake in the sector or care about it do talk positively about the whether it's Ryan as one example, Amanda, other colleagues in the room who do brilliant work and deliver fantastic outcomes. And in a way, only by being positive about it will we help to deal with the Daily Mail headlines of this world, which on occasions can sidetrack us as we constantly worry about what they might write next. So I think the report is thought-provoking, I think it's honest, I think it's also got some practical recommendations in it. And I'll very briefly just say something about those in a moment, but I just want to pick out 2 things that I think are important. One of the things that I'm really pleased the report talks about is the 21st century public servant work that was started by the University of Birmingham, but I'm delighted to say that in the summer, along with PPMA and Solace, we produced an e-book called Walk Tall, which is full of stories from the sector about what people do when they come to work at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning to be 21st century public servants. And the reason I mention it is because there's something incredibly inspirational about reading, and indeed Ryan epitomised this with what he was saying about why he wanted to work for a council. People care about what they do, and they care about the impact that their work has on local communities, on their colleagues and so on. And the reason I mention it is because stories are at the heart of organisational culture. And the more we capture and share and celebrate those stories, the more we'll take some of the steps that were highlighted in the report to move us to where we want to get to. So just briefly, let me just say a couple of things about the recommendations that are in there. The one about organisational structure and hierarchies, which I think again is a fair enough challenge to us. I don't meet many councils that aren't thinking about how they structure their organisation, how they take out unnecessary levels of hierarchy, and indeed a number of them have done it. But I think to do that and do it at the same time that you think about how you design jobs to be empowering and enriching is the real challenge, because it's actually not that difficult to take a structure chart, cross out a few jobs, perhaps take out the odd layer here and there, and then say we've restructured and we've delayered. The challenge is how you actually start almost from the bottom up. What is it we're here to do? What is it we're here to deliver? What skills, behaviours and knowledge do we need in order to do that effectively? And then put the prerequisite number of layers of autonomy in there, or decision-making accountability, in order to make it as slim but as effective as possible. So I think that's really important. When I find my little list of the recommendations, I'll remind myself of the, there we go. I've talked about the importance of sharing stories and ideas and experience, and actually there's already quite a lot of networking goes on in the sector. It doesn't mean we couldn't do more, but there's programmes like Peer into the Future and Aspire, and then there are, which are for HR professionals. There are similar things for other professionals, and I think we need absolutely to facilitate and encourage those sorts of networks, but make sure we're not all talking to each other, not always talking to each other in a way that we don't challenge ourselves. There can be, I think, cases where we sit in a room with the same people we sat in a room with a month ago and we don't really push our thinking on, so I think that's something that's a challenge for us. On the point about councils being great places to work, in the main they are. We don't necessarily articulate it as clearly as we should, and I think the report is right to challenge us on that. But I think things like the Come Back to Social Work campaign, which you talked about, some of the initiatives around planning that Amanda talked about, things like My Day, where we encourage council employees to tweet about what they're doing, and we get thousands of people talking with pride about what they do, are a contribution to that. But until we can get rid of the Daily Mail headlines and we can get positive role models in soap operas, we've still got work to do. I completely agree. So, I think in conclusion, I'm not going to comment on all the recommendations, but I just want to pick those ones out. I think there's lots of good stuff going on in councils, but there's a lot more for us to unravel and a lot more for us to do to make sure that we end up in a position where we're not just trying to sort things out, we're actually making things different. And we need to capture that and we need to share it. And as we do, I think a whole new deal for people who work in local government will emerge.
Thank you very much, Sarah. That was really thoughtful, very interesting indeed. I will hand over now to Andy Donald, Chief Executive of London Borough of Redbridge, for his thoughts.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, so I've been Chief Executive of Redbridge for 11 months, and I'm just going to say a little bit about how this agenda looks, I guess, from my world. I've got to start off by disagreeing with Sarah, so it's a panel debate and discussion, isn't it? So it's a good way to start. I think, from where I sit, there is an absolute deafening silence about the changing need and the changing needs of the workforce in local government. I'm sure there is a discussion happening. I'm sure it's happening amongst HR directors, but if you think about the proportion of time, if I know the proportion of time I spend sitting in meetings or discussing and finding places to discuss this agenda as against, for example, devolution, it's a tiny, tiny proportion of time. So just think, I want to put that out there right away. But the premise is absolutely right. Local government, our organisations, the things we do, the way we do things around here is absolutely changing at an unprecedented pace. And somehow we expect our workforce to be resilient and to cope. And that for me is hardly a recipe for excellence in local government. So I think it's a really critical agenda, and I really welcome the debate we're having here tonight, and hope that it can provide a platform to go forward with this sort of debate. It's interesting, I think about workforce through two lenses really, because it is true, we do need skills and we do need attitudes, don't we, out of our employees, and both of those are changing beyond comprehension. So skills, we heard from St Albans about planners, not so long ago planning was about regulation, now planning is about facilitating development. Frontline housing workers, I don't know many of them that went into housing to say, I'm sorry we don't have housing for you, but that's what we're asking them to do nowadays. Finance, from local government, accounting, I want my finance people to be doing profit and loss accounts, I want them to be doing investment, not expenditure. Communications. Why do I want endless press releases? Sorry, Steve, my leader really does want endless press releases. But I want them to be interested in nudge theory. I want them to be thinking about how we can impact on communities' behaviours. And we're already starting discussions in Redbridge now about what's the future role of social workers and OTs, and why have we got two different roles? So when they all go and see the same person, and are there things? So real changes in the skills that we're asking people to have. And real changes in the attitudes as well, from delivering services to facilitating services, from many roles, from being a council worker to being some kind of place leader or community leader type role, from having very stable roles to perpetual change, from being comfortable working in the unknown. Somebody spoke about ambiguity earlier. It's a critical skill in local government now. We don't know what's happening in 6 months' time, let alone what's going to happen in 5 years' time. And of course, it's really true, we need a range of people with all sorts of skills and attitudes. It's difficult to sort of generalise about these sort of things. But for me, the common thing you really need is motivation. For me, what has always struck me about recruiting and retaining staff throughout my career is motivated staff. Are absolutely the key for both themselves, but also for colleagues and the workforce, and the importance of networks of motivated people. So the report sort of sets out some things. I mean, I was asked just to say a few words about what the opportunities are for me in a sort of chief executive role what the implications of this would be. So, I mean, I think, I see it as my responsibility to create spaces for people's attitudes to shift. It might be physical space, how the office is laid out, how it works. It might be making time, it might be promoting networks. It's about, for me, facilitating and modelling a trust-based environment, and I was really pleased the report emphasises that so much. It's about supporting members as well, because let's not forget, the senior recruitment in local government is actually done by members. They make the decisions, not me. I don't recruit my top team. My leader and my recruitment panel do. So about supporting members to understand differences in and options about the kind of people we could recruit. Millennials, I don't know what a millennial is, I just think it's somebody younger than me. I mean, there is a truism that most of the millennials, most of the people younger than me that I work with or have employed, a critical factor in their decision is who their boss is. Not who their organisation is, not what their job is, but who their boss is, and that's certainly really critical in terms of retaining people as well. My coffee budget has gone through the roof. I've got a whole new top team in the last 11 months, and I'll tell you, I've met so many people, really fascinating and interesting people to try and get that right team. Lots of HR professionals in the room. I think HR needs to change from a kind of regulation to a supporting a trust-based culture. From recruitment management to talent spotting and talent management. We're so shy about talent management and talent spotting in local government. Maybe from human resources, which always sounds to me as though we're managing robots, to employee satisfaction or something like that. So who knows? Just a flavour of the things we are doing and thinking about in Redbridge, just to hopefully provoke a bit of a discussion. So I'm really lucky. I've got a once-in-a-career opportunity to reshape an organisation which perhaps has not really embraced in change like many of the other organisations I've worked with for years. I do have a whole new top team. I'm trying to set the tone in the organisation by promoting open communication and dialogue. How am I doing that? When they gave me a wood-panelled office on day one, I walked out of it and sat open plan with all the staff in the crappy tower block at the end of the road. And I'm still there, and my management team are there as well. Some of them didn't like it when they first started, but very quickly do enjoy it now. I have open door sessions. Anybody can come and see me at any time. 15-minute open door sessions. I thought I might get a lot of people that were a bit miserable or wanting to have a moan. 90% of the people I've come to see have been frustrated about not being able to get on and do some of the stuff they really want to do. And they have fantastic ideas. And I shamelessly nicked that idea, because that's what we should be doing, nicking ideas of other people, off Chris Naylor in neighbouring Barking and Dagenham, and it's worked a real treat. We have, a blog, and I think most chief execs would do that nowadays. We did a whole series of staff forums over the summer. We checked out the values of the organisation with people, and then I got them to draw pictures for 2 hours. Pictures about what the council will be like in 10 years' time and what the place will be like in 10 years' time. Why did I do that? Pictures were rubbish, we published them, people liked them, but actually the thought process of giving people permission to think it's okay to spend a bit of time thinking about the future rather than what's going to happen tomorrow or that person's coming through the door right now. We have a Change Champions Network, which is a diagonal slice across the organisation to support change. We nicked Islington's Innovation Week idea, and we're going to be doing that in January. We've got one big idea event where, who on earth thinks the top team have a monopoly on wisdom? Even with an ex-NLGN director in my top team now, we do not have a monopoly of wisdom. I want to get those ideas and capture them and use them to drive our change programme. And then just 2 or 3 things before I finish about the things we're thinking about. And I'm really interested in your feedback on some of the things that we're thinking about, because we do want to be trying a few different things. We're going to create a test bed environment on one of our floors of our rubbish tower block. The reason we want to call it a test bed is because we want to test things, try things, fail quickly, get on and do something else, rather than do that local government pilot thing that goes on for 6 months or 12 months and we're never quite sure whether we're really going to do it forever or not. So if we're going to do stuff, let's test it. If it doesn't work, let's move on to something else. But it will be around getting people from right across the organisation to sit in a very different space together for periods of maybe 10 weeks and try different things. We're going to have an open advert after Christmas. I've got 500 agency workers in my organisation. I want many more. I want far less than that. That's 500 vacancies. We want to put an advert out that just says, come and work for Redbridge, and says a few fantastic things about Redbridge. No jobs, no job descriptions published, no role descriptions. Put 2 of our best people on the end of the phone, and then people can ring up, we can talk to them about the sort of things they're interested in doing, and look at whether we can match them to roles that we have, or better still, match roles to people as well, which is a bit anathema for local government, I do know. I want to have a bonfire of HR policies. Sorry, you can all go back and tell Marge, most of you don't know my HR director, but flexible working, why do I need a 30-page policy on flexible working, and why does people, young people coming into the organisation, 3 sentences, deliver the necessary outcomes, do it when you like, do it when you like, full stop. If the necessary outcomes to deal with customers, they'll be there between 9 and 5, but if not, I don't need 30 pages on that. And as I said, maybe we'll toy with renaming HR employee satisfaction. So the only thing I would say, to sort of caveat all of that from my perspective, is the report talks a lot about culture. The one thing that I always tell my management team is it's got to be about culture, not about cult. It's really easy to set up a cult in an organisation, and 1 or 2 people leave and the whole thing falls flat on its face. So it's actually really important when we think about this that we embed it properly through the organisation.
Thank you very much, Andy, and I can confirm that not all NLGN directors have a monopoly on wisdom. It's entirely true. I want to hand over to Sir Steve Bullock, who is the Mayor of the London Borough of Lewisham.
Thank you. And I guess there'll be an expectation that I'll say something about how this looks from a member perspective. And I'm not sure how many more members there are in the room. I had a quick look at there might be 1. Is there another member in the room? No, it's just me, so I can say what I like about elected members. To be serious, well actually no, not to be serious. I don't get the millennial thing at all, because to me, everybody in local government is younger than I am. Because I completed 40 years in local government in October. And what I've seen is local government go from being absolutely a laughingstock in the 1980s to reaching a point in the early 2000s when up and down the country we had some spectacularly successful organisations that were really making a difference. We've now reached a point where somehow we still have expectations that our resource base is the same when it isn't. And I think we're really struggling in some councils to get to grips with that. We've shed about half of the staff in Lewisham. So we've taken out capacity. We're expecting people to work in ways to deliver things on a way that we just have never asked them to do before. And in some ways I quite envy an organisation which maybe didn't change very quickly, because you've now got a chance to actually leap ahead. Those of us who think we used to be quite good actually have been finding it really hard to make the adjustment to where we now are. And this report, I think, really stimulates some thinking about what we need to do, the way we need to, the idea of an agile workforce which we allow to take risks, I think is absolutely the way to go. We can't have the levels of management. We've taken them all out. I did a report with Richard Lees from Manchester about 6 years ago, which was all about taking the resources out of the back office in order to protect the front line services. Great idea, except when you then want to make change, there's nobody there. And somehow that means freeing up people in the organisation to do things in a very, very different way. And that's what I took from this report. It was saying, actually, you can do this. But it could be quite a scary thing to do. And the people that it could be particularly scary for will be elected members. In part because they imagine that they run the organisation. They sit there in the meetings and they think that they make decisions which immediately ripple down and everybody goes away and implements them. I'm being slightly unfair to some of my colleagues, but members are locked into a way of working now that stemmed from the 2000 Local Government Act that actually presumes there is greater capacity for governance in most local authorities than actually exists. And it is one of the tensions that is there. People will ask for reports, they will ask to do, and actually I watch officers' faces, and they think, well, I can do that, but I'll have to stop doing something else in order to do it. So we look for the person from the graduate scheme, and we ask them to do the interesting stuff, which is great, because that means that they will learn a huge amount and they will step up and become a manager in the not too distant future. But somehow we will need to find a way to have a dialogue with members, and I congratulate those authorities which I've mentioned in the report who've started to do this, that says you have to let go and you have to take risks and you have to be prepared to explain to your communities that in the circumstances we now face, we have to do things so much more, in such a different way to what we've done in the past, that there will be failures. And that failure isn't something that you react to by working out who you can blame. You react by what can we learn from that, how can we find different ways to do it the next time round. Members are very bad at that. They will tend to look for people to blame, and that then makes them very risk averse. And if we're going to make change on the scale that we need to make over the next period, we're all going to have to help members not to do that. And a report like this, I think, is a really good starting point for that discussion.
Thank you very much, Steve. Incredibly insightful and helpful. And we have the opportunity now for comments or questions from the floor. We have the panel here, but if you want to ask a question of the research team or of the excellent case study from St Albans, then please feel free to ask that as well. And we have a microphone here. If someone going to do the microphone? Okay, thank you. So, questions, comments? Yes, lovely here. And if you could say, if you don't mind saying your name and where you're from, that'd be very helpful. as
Caroline
well.
Nugent, I'm the Director of HR for One Source. So I know Marge. It is a bit of a challenge back to Andy, because as HRDs we have tried for a number of years to bring some of these changes in, and we have had resistance from chief execs that we've had to battle through. So my OD strategy has risk taking in there. What we're not very good of in local government is holding people to account. So we will say that needs to happen, you need to do X. We don't want to be the ones that police it. We want to do the talent, we want to do everything. But because we've been cut back and managers are not doing some of the stuff they should do, even though they've been trained, we go round in this cycle. So we would love to do some of the more innovative stuff, and it's happening, but it's not happening as quick as it should be. And I think that's what Sarah was trying to sort of emphasise as part of it. So for us it would be, we really need that support of the chief exec. We have, interns, we have graduates, and again, sometimes they get the sexy work because the others are doing the day job, but there's some real talent there we don't exploit. So I do think, absolutely, we've got a GAIN, we call it the GAIN network, Graduates Apprentice Intern Network, to get these young people really using some of their knowledge. But it's how we get the rest of the workforce knowing they have got to take the risks. No one will support them to take the risks. And we'll support HR to bring in some of that challenge when we're banging our heads sometimes because people are not listening. Bit of a challenge back. Sorry.
Thank you very much. I'll take a couple of points, 2 or 3 points. Anyone else wanted to take? Yes, the gentleman here. Okay.
Yeah, hi, John Sutcliffe from Local Government Association. Again, it's a question to Andy, but I'd be interested in others' view. I was very struck by the quite bold strategy you have about the open advert and reducing the number of agency staff, and interested in whether informally you have a target for success on that, or whether you test bedded it already in the way that you described it, or you're just leaping at it, as it were. Because it has been kind of noted as a I mean, just to expand the point slightly, if I may, you do get some people in leadership positions in local government who say, well, casualised agency labour is just the way the whole economy is going, so we just have to work with it. But I kind of share your view. I think that really we want a whole-time dedicated workforce who are part of a team. But it's a fascinating way of trying to achieve that in kind of one big leap, so I wondered whether you could expand on it slightly.
Thank you very much, and I think there was a point over there as well. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Richard Orty from Uttlesford District Council in North West Essex, for anyone who doesn't know where Uttlesford is, which is probably everyone here apart from people from Basildon, I thought. I'm just wondering, it's a question for Andy and Steve. Have you noticed a change in attitude and approach of newer members in recent years? You've got the traditional view of stale male and male members, and I think we have noticed a different type of person coming forward to be an elected councillor in the last few years. I'm just wondering if that's something that you've experienced as well, and whether that's making a difference in terms of making the political element less risk averse.
Thank you very much. I'd actually like to just start with Sarah and just take up that first point that was made about resistance from chief executives and maybe other senior management to some of the radical changes that have to occur. Is that something that is shifting, or is there a real problem still there, do you think, in addressing that inertia which might be there at more senior levels?
Without wanting to do the cop-out answer, the truth is it depends on the chief exec. And I just to go back to Andy's challenge to me about there's a deafening silence, the point I was making was actually there's a lot of people talking about it, and if you compare the number of chief execs and members who are talking about workforce issues now to 10 years ago, it's not deafening. The problem is that not enough of them are talking about it, or they're not talking about it for long enough, and those of us that are in the heart of this debate keep talking to each other, and it's about spreading the debate out, I think was what I was trying to get to, because you're right, there is definitely more work to do. I think one of the problems is that this is really frightening. So the idea of empowering people and the accountability point that Caroline made is frightening. If this is going to work, you've got to have confident, skilled, supported managers to make it work. you can't just say to a manager, I want you to go off and empower your workforce without them having the confidence to do it. And I think that's a really crucial word in all of this. And confidence comes from skills and practice and support and feeling empowered from those that are above you. And I think that's something that is an ongoing challenge for us across local government. Our leadership focus has been at senior levels. There's a massive piece of work for that middle level, I think. So, and I think that some chief execs totally get it, others want to get it, but are distracted by the 3 million and want other things that are on their to-do list. And actually, that's why when HR want to be daring, but meanwhile they've got a to-do list that includes, have we restructured this team? Have we sorted out our sickness absence levels? Have we got, and I agree with you, have we got rid of our 93 policies and procedures, only 23 of which had any real value? It's not a surprise that things aren't moving as quickly as we would want.
Thank you very much. And Andy, I think it's a very interesting point about agency work and creating this new culture. Is there a tension, a paradox between those two aspects?
I mean, I think the reality is we're always going to need to use short-term agency workers, temporary workers in various roles, whether it be through a period of change, whether it be through hard to fill posts. So I think it's a bit of both. I'd set a target that I think we're close to 500. I've set a target. I want 75% of them out of the organisation within a year. And that's that kind of target, but the point is I want people to think about why we have agency workers that have been in the organisation for 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. Yeah. And I think in terms of the part of the question around the sort of open advert, I don't know. It's that working in the unknown thing and being quite comfortable about it, to be honest. But what I would say is that recruitment is not a science. And I think we have spent many, many years in local government finding ways of making recruitment a bit of a science in terms of job descriptions, evaluations, etc. I understand why we do all of that, and I understand that we might need to, when we do the open advert, then fit people into roles. But for me, recruitment is always a two-way process, and we always forget that in local government. The person on the other side of the table has got to be convinced that this is a great organisation to work for, or a great boss to work for, or whatever it might be. And I think for me, we've got to put more emphasis on that, and the report is really helpful in terms of, I think, opening up that debate. What do we have to do as local government to be attractive employers? What do we have to do as managers in local government to be attractive people to work for and to stay working for? And I really liked some of the ideas that we heard from St Albans about some of the things they've done, so I'm going to nick some of those as well.
Thank you. And Steve, there's a question about whether there's a changing attitude from newer members. Is that something you're perceiving?
There's a really long answer to that about how local politicians, just as much as national politicians, have misread what communities think about them. Which I won't give, but it's relevant background, because what I think we're seeing, and I can't put numbers on this, but I can think of examples in my own authority and other places in London, is members who wear their politics very lightly and do things in their community that make sense because they recognise that the council can't do everything. So I've got some members who've they've set up, it's not just a food bank, it's a really interesting, innovative project that does a whole load of things around food and nutrition, and they've made it happen. That wouldn't have happened 10 years ago. That wasn't what members did. Members went back to the town hall and told people at the town hall to do that. So I think it is beginning to happen. The question will be, can it happen sufficiently, and can we actually find ways? And one of the things that made it work for them is we have a tiny little budget that each member can use in their ward, and I am fighting every year to stop my colleagues cutting that instead of something else, because I actually think the value for money that presents is stunning. And actually some of the officers are very acute as well, because they will also see ways that tiny little bits can actually unleash things in the current climate. So they're also thinking about things in the way they wouldn't have done before.
Thank you. I think Andy just wanted to come back on one point there.
Yeah, I just wanted to come back on the point about organisational development, the role of HR, etc. going forward. You know, I think it is, when I got to Redbridge, there was some fantastic stuff that HR had done. They've done loads of good work around vision and values. I went to the organisation and I asked how many people knew what the visions were. Marge put her hand up and nobody else did. So, you know, so I think there is, I get the point that there is the need for a supportive management team in order to be able to translate and take some of that work to the organisation. But my challenge back to HR professionals is, you know, you've got to co-produce that stuff. You can't sit and write it yourselves. I'm sure most of you are kind of doing that, but there are, and you know, we will all acknowledge there are some people that won't do that. And on the organisational development front, why do we have small teams in organisations called organisational development? That's my management team's job. That's every manager in the organisation's job. And if we put it all into a little box, I'm afraid it's never ever going to develop the organisation at all. So that's our challenge, I think, collectively in that space.
Thank you. I think we started a little bit late, so if we've got time for a couple more questions or comments from the floor. Yeah, Barry there.
Hi, just one question, obviously Barry from PPMA, but also from an Associate Director for People in Business at Wiltshire Council. Again, obviously one of the case studies. Apparently it's the festive season, and it was that tonight on the way into London. Lots of lights. In 16 days' time we've got a significant event that happens every year. So the question is based on your way home tonight, or when you get home tonight, when you're writing your letter to St Nicholas or Father Christmas, in terms of what you like for Christmas. I'd like to ask the panel for one wish, one thing that if they could really get and achieve on their list tonight, on their letter to Santa. What would it be based on the workforce, based on not necessarily everything in the report, but get one key thing that you would wish for that would happen fairly significantly, happen overnight between now and Christmas? What would it be?
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Can anyone top that as a question? Okay, so I will give, that's a great question to finish on, so I will give the panel a chance to answer that. Who wants to go first? Who's had time to think?
I don't mind going.
Go on, Sarah, go on.
Go on, Sarah. You've done your letter
well, yeah. You did mean you didn't mean something to do with HR and OD, did you?
No,
you just meant to do with my personal life.
Don't be silly. No.
That's why I've got a very long list. I'm going to say that the thing that I would like is that by the end of next year, the majority, I won't put a specific percentage on it, the majority of councils are confident about designing jobs around their people rather than they're making people fit their jobs. They make jobs fit their people rather than people fit their jobs. How they do that, and you know, how they do it, I think is you won't be surprised from the LGA's perspective that I say this. Every council will decide for itself. But I think if we could move to a world where we design our jobs around our people, we will achieve a vast majority of the things that are recommended in this report.
Thank you. Andy?
I'm tempted to say that the internet shuts down when the working day finishes, and it doesn't start again until the working day starts, so that overnight, whether it's members of the public, whether it's councillors, whether it's officers, people actually stop and they don't just pump things off that doesn't recognise that there's a real person trying to do something behind there. But actually, I think it's more, in the end, it's about the complexity of organisations, and can all of us, in my case at the moment it's particularly between health and social care, can we make the rhetoric that we are using about partnership into something real? Because if we don't, we're all going to be in trouble.
Okay, so the flippant answer is I want a really good coffee shop in Ilford, because I've had to drink so much rubbish coffee schmoozing all these potential employees. I think I think, to be honest, I mean, what I'd like to see is I mean, I've already picked up so many from here today, is that kind of little book of ideas. You know, let's share ideas more. Let's just take a bit more of a risk about some of the things that we can do. Local government is forever trying to seek permission from somebody else, whether it's government or the mayor or somebody to do some of this stuff. We can just do it. So let's have a little book of ideas of how people have done it, who's done it, and let's just try some of that stuff out.
Brilliant, thank you very much. I would like to say thank you very much to Sarah, to Steve and to Andy for their contributions, to Ryan and Amanda for sharing that excellent case study with us, but also given the focus is workforce this evening, I also want to say a very special thank you to the members of the team who have organised this event, but also to Jody from GatenbySanderson and to Claire and to Lucy for their excellent research and writing on this report, and thanks to all of you for taking part. So thank you very much. Thank you.